We're up. We're ready. It's Thursday night. It's Parenting Porcupines. And boy, do we have some gossip for you tonight. We're going to be talking about the Murdaugh murders. And specifically, it's the anniversary of Mallory Beach's death. And we've got some ideas about what to tell your kids about privilege and wealth and scandal, quite frankly. So we'll be here for the next half an hour or so. It's the Libertarian Moms. Thanks for joining us. All I'm hearing lately is free association. And that's the kind of libertarian principle we're going to get to by the end of the show. But before we get there, we're going to go down this like path of Inside Edition-esque South Carolina drama. And Jess is going to lead us there. If you're looking for the show notes, which will give you all the relevant links to everything you'd like to know, they're out there at parentingporcupines.com. So Jessica, walk us through it. It's season 4, episode 3. Be careful who you know. Free association and generational privilege. Bring us in.
So on this day in 2019, a group of friends decided to go to an oyster roast, and they were taking the Murdaugh family boat. They went to the oyster roast. They got tanked, maybe not all of them, at least one of them. Stopped at a bar in Beaufort where shots were had, not all of them again, and took off down the river and hit a bridge, the piling on Archer's Creek Bridge, which is just off of Paris Island in Beaufort County. And Mallory Beach, who was, I think, 19 at the time, was killed in this accident. And the young man whose family it was is Paul Murdaugh, and his dad is Alec Murdaugh. They are a prominent Low Country family. And so this thing, this was kind of in local news. This accident was in local news. There was a big local story, it ran a lot down in the Hilton Head, Jasper, Beaufort area, lawsuits and things like that. And then there was some shadiness that happened after the accident where the dad was maybe trying to pull some strings. They are a multi-generational family of lawyers. And so a lot of power, a lot of privilege, because they live in one of the poorest counties in South Carolina. But they are very wealthy. So anyhow, after this boat accident happened, that's when people really started digging into this family. And as they peeled back the layers of the onion, I mean, it was just more stuff and more stuff and more stuff. And Mandy Matney from Fitz News has done an incredible job of putting all of this together in her podcast. It's called The Murdaugh Murders. I would strongly recommend that everybody go check it out. It's very well done. She does a very good job of presenting the facts as they are. There are some very powerful players. There's so much to the story. We can't tell it all in 30 minutes, right? But the idea of this whole conversation is, how do we talk to our kids? How are we using this situation, this story, to talk to our kids about this generational privilege and the dangers of taking some solace or feeling some safety in someone else's privilege? Because it's wild. It's a wild story.
Yeah, so there was a couple things, and I'm putting up the website and all that on there so that people can go out there and follow, because you did a really good job with these notes on parentingporcupines.com. And of course, Mandy's done a really good job with the story too, as you mentioned. And there's some links there into some of these adjacent articles. And one of the things I thought was really interesting is that this young man who's a member of this Murdaugh family, who was apparently driving the boat, allegedly driving the boat when the boat hit the piling, flung this girl out of the boat and she died. They believe that her head hit the concrete and then she drowned. And so in this accident, he's being charged with like wildlife laws, like in terms of driving the boat while intoxicated and like these things that are like part of the Department of Natural Resources as the
Right.
law enforcement agency that's investigating it, which I thought that
Yep.
was kind of interesting because we're not looking at a criminal investigation. But his attorney is one of the top criminal attorneys in the state who also happens to be a member of the state legislature, Dick Harpootlian, which I thought that was really interesting too, because here's
Mhm.
some money thrown at, this really high profile Dick Harpootlian attorney, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of money going in to defend this kid against the Department of Natural Resources on these kind of boating charges.
Yeah.
And you referred to it when you were telling the story about it being an accident. But what we're seeing is like the possibility this is criminal negligence. Like this
Yeah.
is somebody behaving in a criminal way. He was underage, he was drinking. Like this is criminal behavior. And it's not the first time. And that's why, as you said, like Mandy kind of peeling back the layers of this, what this looks like is
Yeah.
generation after generation of doing bad things and
Yeah.
getting away with it simply because they have money and they have privilege and influence, right?
Yeah. And after the accident, like I said, people started really digging into this family and their past and kind of their current, you know, trajectory, so to speak. And so, there's the question of a housekeeper who mysteriously died from a fall.
Right.
There's, a young man who was hit by a car and, again, mysterious circumstances. And, there may or may not be some link. There may or may not be some questionable things that went on during the investigation. So just a lot of, murky water. But then after all of this stuff kind of started coming to light, Paul, which was the Murdoch who was allegedly driving the boat, and his mother, Maggie, were at their hunting resort or hunting property in, I think it's Jasper County, and maybe Colleton. Anyway, but they were on this property and they were shot and killed. They were basically assassinated. So then the father, Alec Murdoch, found them. And you can hear the 911 calls through the podcast and everything. It's just a lot. But then shortly thereafter, I think it was Labor Day weekend, I think is when it happened. But there was a news report that someone had shot him in an apparent robbery. And it came out that he had hired somebody he had represented. There were a lot of connections to this person. And he had hired this person to kill him so that his surviving son, the only surviving member of this immediate family, his name is Buster, so that he would receive this money from the insurance company. And what's interesting is that immediately the man that he contracted to do this was in jail, like completely different set of circumstances for that man as opposed to what they were for Alec to begin with. And then some additional things started coming to light. There was some malpractice, some fraud, embezzlement, a lot of things that are currently being investigated in the story. So a lot of people who are tied to this family are now going down with the family because they never stood up to them and said, I recognize that your family has been a powerful family for 100 years, but I don't care. And I'm not gonna do this tomfoolery with you because I'm not going down for it. Right.
Wrong is wrong.
So
Yeah.
so now we're kind of getting at that libertarian argument here, right? This idea of disassociation. So part of it is when people get attracted to this sort of circle of power, right? And it's early, like it happens to our kids, it happens early. They
Very
recognize
early.
the popular kid in the class,
Yep.
the prettiest girl, the most handsome boy, the person that looks the coolest, right? Maybe they're the class clown, they tell the jokes, whatever it is. There's like the popular kid in the class, and they're attracted to that person person, right? For whatever reason, they want to be friends with that person, they want to hang out with that person, and it starts that early, right? But even as adults, we're not immune from it because we see the people around us who have privilege. They seem to be able to get things that we can't get, right? And you see this happening in churches where like who's going to be in what committees, right? Like we still socially kind of organize ourselves toward the people who have power, or at least don't want to be on the wrong side of that power. And so there's like this natural human instinct toward that, but like at some point the line has to get drawn where you say like, I'm not, like you call it tomfoolery, like I'm not going to allow you to imperil my future or my morality because you've done something wrong and gotten caught. And like, where do you teach your kids how to recognize that?
Yep. My dad always told us my dad and his sayings, one of his favorites was, you're known by the company you keep. You are the company you keep.
Yep.
If your friends are idiots, people are going to assume you're an idiot.
Yeah.
So even if you're different than the people you hang out with, no one knows that. You're all a group. If they're doing things that are wrong, it's assumed you're doing things that are wrong. And no one's going to believe you.
My dad always told us that, people only have so much power as you allow them to have, right? Like if a person has that power, it's only because the people around them allow them to have that power. And if, Melissa, it's like you said, if you're not standing against it, you're seen as that same person, right? And at some point, furthermore, at some point, that person's actions are going to have a direct impact on you, whether it gets you hurt, whether it gets you arrested, whether it gets you kicked out of school. That person's actions will have consequences. And if you are part of that, then if you're part of the action that they've, taken, then the consequences are going to apply to you too.
Yeah. Well, we're complicit, right? So when we're in a group of people and one person sort of takes that lead and they lead whatever it is, whether they're leading the group into, shenanigans, right? Unlawful shenanigans, or whether it's bullying of another person or outcasting another person, we're complicit if we don't stand up against that person who holds that power. And I think that's probably the conversation that we're having the most in our house is because, and we've done this before on this show, we talked about consent, right? And so the extension of consent is being complicit in something, meaning that it might not be happening to me. And so I don't, and I don't necessarily get into the consent conversation because I wasn't asked for my permission. But when I watch it happening, I'm complicit when it's happening, right? If I'm not putting a stop to it. And this, like I said, has come up multiple times in the conversations we've had. How do you teach your kids to stand up to bullies? How do you teach them to stand up to somebody who is doing the wrong thing and tell them, look, I'm not going to stand for this. This is not okay. And I think it starts by modeling that behavior, right? Being the person that goes, I'm not going to sit here while you guys are saying bad things about somebody else, or I'm not going to be the person that, I'm not going to steal from the Sunday school to, whatever, right? Like just you start by don't be a bad person yourself, right?
Yeah.
But then you model that behavior for your kids too, like to walk away when things go over the line and tell them that that's why you did it, right?
Yep. I had yesterday, she's 7 now. My 7-year-old got in the car and told me that one of the kids in her class that's always been a jerk to her, all of a sudden is being very nice and wants to be her friend. And I told her, okay, that's great. If you want to be his friend, be his friend. But you need to tell him if he's going to start being a jerk to you again, you're not his friend. You are only friends with people that treat you nice. So if he decides to start acting like an idiot, you're just going to leave. You're not going to talk to him. That's it.
Well, so that goes back to because we talked about this before about Holly and I having the conversation around what is friend behavior, right? Like, and then being very clear about, do friends hit you? No. Do friends say mean things to you? No. Do friends
Mhm.
push you? No, right? So if that's true, then this person cannot be your friend. If this person's treating you that way, and that was kindergarten, we were having that conversation, right?
Yes, he's
So
in
like,
first grade.
Yeah.
yeah. So like now, like having an understanding of like what is the behavior I expect from people I call my friends. And so now, like if we think about Mallory and like give poor Mallory, right? So here's Mallory Beach in this evening out with friends. She's one of 6 people on this boat. There's 3 couples on the boat. They go out. Her boyfriend's trying to protect her. Her boyfriend's trying to maintain control of the situation.
Mhm.
He can't get control of the situation, right? But things have escalated well beyond the point of bad decision making, right? Like the
Yeah.
bad decision making was early.
It was
And it's like
hours ago.
starts when they get on the boat in the first place and there's no
Yeah.
lights on the
Yeah,
boat.
there were no lights
And
on
they
the
know
boat.
they're going to come back in the dark, right? Like,
Yeah.
why are you even on a boat with no lights if you know that like why did you even get on the boat in the first place? Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're and you can't say that right at this point, and certainly not, Mallory, may she rest in peace, right? Like
Right.
that bad decision making started early. It started
Yeah.
early, right?
Well, and that's the question. Like those are the types of questions that when I'm talking to Jackson, because he's getting to that age where he wants to go out with his friends, and he's going to be driving in a couple of years and he's going to do stupid shit because he's a boy. Like he's a kid. They do stupid shit all the
Well, they
time.
don't have that prefrontal cortex,
Right.
right? Like
But
it's difficult to make decisions when you don't have the full
yeah.
functionality of your brain.
And I want to be very clear that I would absolutely not ever blame the victims of this
Mm-mm.
horrible tragedy. I would never do that. So this is absolutely not me blaming them for what happened. However, as parents, I think we have to ask the questions. We have to explain this is what happened. This is why it happened. What would that evening have looked like if they had all said, or even one of them had said, I'm not getting on that damn boat. There are no lights.
You've
I'm not
been
getting on that boat.
drinking.
Or-
Even we've stopped for alcohol 2 times,
Yeah.
and you're drinking. I'm
Or,
not getting on the boat.
in Beaufort, when Paul is obviously belligerent. I mean, there's video of them walking down the dock and he is completely belligerent and everybody gets back on the boat. And I think part of that is probably because I think these people were 18, 19, 20. And so they're adults, but they're not grown necessarily, right?
Like I remember the wonderful decisions I made at 18, 19, 20.
Right. So
Right.
you look at the situation and you're like, well, maybe they were worried that they wouldn't have a ride home, or what if their parents were out of town or whatever. And so I think I have used this also as an example of how important it is. If you feel like you're in an unsafe situation, you call me. I will drive to the end of the earth if I have to get you out of a bad situation. And I don't ever want you to feel like you can't call me. I don't ever want you to feel like you don't have someone to call. And I am not saying that was the situation for any of these folks, but I do think that that's something that a lot of kids, especially teenage kids, when they are starting to make those, stupid decisions and do stupid things, I do think that's part of it. They get themselves into those situations and then it's like, well, I don't want to call mom because
she'll kill me.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so that's the hyperbole intended, right? Because
Yeah.
here's the thing, and we were just having this conversation yesterday. My friend Alexa and I were walking yesterday, and both of our children are about the same age, right? Early into high school, and all that prefrontal cortex not having been fully developed, it's difficult to think all the way through, like, and really be able to weigh, right? And so sometimes the lies are coming because they think that the consequences of telling the truth are worse than the consequences of telling the lie, right? Like,
Right.
or they think that that it'll work out somehow, right? Like they can't see exactly how, but if I just do it this way, it'll be okay, right? Even though the odds seem like it's not going to be okay, like I'm just going to hope for the best here. Right. And so
Yeah.
those kinds of things too, like how do you help your kids to read the room, read the situation, recognize what the dangers are, and then to say something like, I don't have a choice here. What do I have to do? I got to call my mom and ask her what I should do. Right. I've got to call my dad and see what he thinks I should do here. And know that, like, just by saying, here's the situation I'm in, they'll be able to get some good advice from somebody who may have some more experience with that without being punished for
Yeah.
being in that situation, right? And there's something happening. There's some text messaging going around and an adjacent friend group that these text messages were like rape jokes between these boys about one of the boys' girlfriend. I
Oh
know, right?
my
And this
God.
is middle school, right? And
Yeah.
so the one friend wants to disassociate with these boys
Yeah.
because he's not comfortable with this conversation that's being had. Well, of course, now they're, the whole group chat is in conversation. And so because he's on the group chat, did you know, when should you have, right? Like if you're this kid's mom, that you're like, what did you see? And why didn't you come to me and say, like,
Yeah.
mom, this is what's being said and I'm not comfortable with it and I don't know what to do, right? But instead
Yeah.
it's like, hopefully nobody will catch us. Hopefully nobody will know. I'll just get out of the situation and maybe it'll go away. And I just can't, like, these things are so pervasive, maybe is the right word for it. They're just so everywhere right
Yeah.
now. That kids have access to conversation and communication that
Yeah.
maybe we didn't have,
Yeah.
right?
I think that's really tough. I think that's really tough. I know it's tough for me. I was raised, my dad, because my mom and dad divorced when I was a freshman in high school. And so I lived with my dad. And so it was just me and my dad and my brother. But my dad and I've talked about it before. We had a really cool relationship. He always trusted me and he let me know that he trusted me. And he would give me license to do the things that I wanted to do. And I knew that if I screwed up, I was going to lose his trust. And that was the one thing that I never wanted to lose. Right. And it was because we had a lot of conversations. We talked a lot about the things that I was probably going to experience and what was right and what was wrong and what did I have to accept and what did I not have to accept from friends, from boyfriends, from teachers. It didn't matter who. Right. And so he was very good about having those very honest and very candid conversations and then giving me enough rope that I could have hung myself, but I chose not to because I was equipped with the knowledge and I knew that I had his trust. And for me, that was very important. And I see a lot of that in Jackson and in Caldwell. And I'm so thankful for that. But I think it's because that's kind of how we approach it in our house. We do give them a lot of room. And, if they screw up and they're honest about it, we talk about how disappointed we are, the things they could have done differently. Sometimes there are consequences depending on what the thing is. But at the end of the day, it's not addressing it in a way that causes them fear, that makes them not ever want to tell us things. They know
But
they have a
and
safe
now's the
place.
time though, right, though? Because
Yeah,
now's the time when the stakes are so low.
yeah,
And that's what I keep saying to Holly, like, because
yeah,
we're storytelling people. So like everything is in storytelling vocabulary in our house.
yeah,
So like we're watching Moana and I'm like, why does Moana crash the boat the first time she goes out? We had this whole conversation around that. Okay. And so how difficult this is going to be, right? So that the viewer knows how difficult it's going to be for her to be able to cross the reef. So we get through that conversation. I say to Holly, like, the stakes are so low right now for you as a person. If you mess up right now, it's a grade, right? Like it might be, a stain on your sweater, you've ruined something, you can't wear it again. Like the stakes are very low, but eventually they're going to get much higher where you do something like Mallory Beach did and get into a boat with a drunk driver, right? Like, and you can't come back from those kinds of mistakes. So the key is to create a sense of like a problem solving process where I like take in the information, I understand what's at stake, I think, what would mom do? And then I, right, like, and I'm saying to her, like, I need for you to create in your head this kind of step by step that you go through, so that even the smallest decision that you're making it with this methodology. When the big decisions come along, you can put that methodology in place and you know it's going to lead you on the right direction. She said to me this week that she was working really hard to be a good kid for me. And I started laughing. I was like, I appreciate that. And good is good. Like, don't get me wrong. I said, I just, for now, the stakes are very low. But, you know, you can help me by just not doing any of the stupid shit that teenagers do.
Yeah.
She goes, I'll keep that in mind, Mom, when the stupid shit comes up. I was like, okay.
And if you do something stupid, call me before it gets too stupid, please.
Well, so you mentioned, though, that Jackson and Caldwell seem to have the same kind of response. But Melissa, you've got 3 kids. Is it 3 different methods? Is it 3 different communication styles? Like, do they seem to process things differently? Is the boy doing stupid stuff and the girls are all in line, or is it vice versa? Like, what's happening?
Oh,
I mean, it's got to be different,
the
right?
boy does stupid stuff all the time. I love him, but he's going to be the death of me. This boy and his stupid stuff. But yeah, it's little stupid stuff. He's 11. How much trouble can he actually get into? So we're trying the make dumb decisions now, learn from them, and make better decisions later when it can actually screw up your life.
Right.
And yeah, and the girls are completely different. Isabel my youngest, can take people or leave people. She's the one that this boy is being nice to me for some reason this week. My middle child, our neighbor is mean to her all the time. This little boy that lives next door. She insists on playing with him. And she comes home crying every time. And I keep trying to convince her, if he's going to be mean to him, mean to you, don't play with him. She refuses, because if someone wants to play with her, she has to play with him. So we're working on that, like saying no. Because you want to play with me today doesn't mean I have to want to play with you. It's very aggravating, because
that is the greatest lesson.
I watch her get hurt over and over again. Why do you keep going to play with this kid? He's just a jerk to you every single time.
Yeah.
It is the greatest lesson, though, when she learns that when he comes to the door, she can just say no. You don't have to make up an excuse. And so it started when Holly was little and somebody would come to play and she would say, can you just tell them I'm not here? And I'm like, no, but you can come downstairs and say, I don't want to play. It doesn't mean I never want to play. It just means today, right now, I don't want to play. Check back
no
later.
Is a complete sentence.
Is it? And it's a full, you can just say, I don't want to play. You don't have to say any reason why.
You don't owe an explanation. You don't owe them anything. Yep.
Yeah. So let's talk this generational wealth thing real quick, because I don't want to lay off on that. We don't want to clickbait our people and think they were going to hear about it and not do anything about it. Generational privilege. Sadly, I don't think any of us are living on our generational wealth.
Nope.
But are you seeing,
appreciate it? Yeah.
That's right. Are there advantages to being friends if these people aren't jerks? If they're not jerks, right? Because not all people who have generational wealth are running around with their privilege showing all the time, right? Is there an advantage to associating with people who have these kinds of, I don't know, longevity, history, position? Should our kids want to be friends with these folks?
I don't know that I would encourage them to be friends with those folks for any reason that they wouldn't want to be friends with anybody else, because they're people. And I think that the generational privilege comes from treating them like they are more, because their, great grandfather started the biggest law firm in Jasper or Hampton County. And then their great grandfather was the, solicitor, and their grandfather was the solicitor, and their dad was this hotshot attorney. I think that giving those people, like being their friend because of that, or looking at that as some benefit to you, is part of what causes this. And so I tend to just say no. Like, if you're going to be friends with them because they're a good person, be friends with them because they're a good friend. But you really don't want to be friends with someone just because of what they can do for you or because of the association with that name, because that's not your name. That's their
Right.
name.
You agree with that, Melissa?
I do. Yes. Yes. If you want to be friends with them because you genuinely like them as a person and y'all are compatible and want to be friends, that's great. And having friends of all different statuses, socioeconomic, racial, all that is good for a kid.
Mm-hmm.
You learn how life is different for different people, and you learn empathy, and you learn to see things through different lenses. But if that's the only reason you're friends with them, yeah, no, that's just using people.
No.
Yeah, and I can see there's, here's a popular group of kids. I don't like them all, but my good friend is in this group, so I'm gonna hang around with this group, even though I don't really like them, or don't like them all, or I don't really approve of the things that they do. And so helping our kids to disassociate without being hurtful, right? Hey, good friend, I understand that you like being around them. I just don't have a whole lot in common with them. How about you and I just spend time together, just us, right? And helping them feel strong about being able to say, like, that's just not my group. I'm just not with them, is probably really crucial too. And supporting them when they decide to disassociate from a group that's not the right fit for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I gotta say, it always, everyone thinks it's so strange. My best friend and I have very few friends in common. We went to
Same.
the same we went to the same high school, but outside of school hours, we had completely different friend groups. And
My
it's
best
not that
friend too.
I disapproved of her friends. They were just different than my friends.
Mm-hmm. I
And
had the same experience.
yeah, and so it's really weird that her friends are her friends and my friends are my friends, but we're best friends. And
Yeah.
screw everybody else.
Yeah.
So that feels kind of like what you're talking about. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not friends with your friends, but we are friends.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and the world gets bigger. Because Holly was homeschooled last year, and then next year we'll go to, and she's at the online school this year at Connections Academy, and next year she'll go on campus. And I said to her, like, even high school, while high school will be so much bigger, right? So much bigger than even middle school was, it's still not nearly as big as college is going to be and as big as the world is, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's so much room in the world for all of us to move around that it's absolutely fine if they don't. So if your friends aren't associating with the same group that you're in, they're already talking about whether or not they're all going to join the same clubs and they're all going to do the same stuff. And I'm like, but the whole point of joining those clubs is to meet new people and to make new
Mm-hmm.
friends that have interests that you have, and so it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that going into high school, and what that looks like for them. I definitely remember being in high school and having a bunch of different groups of friends, right? Like my swim team
Mm-hmm.
people, my ROTC people, like, who all the different student council people, like the different people that I hung out with. And I always have had multiple groups of folks that were friends with me. And sometimes they knew each other and sometimes they didn't. And that was
Yeah.
actually okay. So, and it's still okay. I have you guys, I love you like sisters. And I have my other friends that are just completely unaffiliated with what we're doing here as far as libertarian moms are concerned. Although a few of them every now and then they'll catch the videos. They're like, "Were you drunk on YouTube?" I'll be like, "No,
No, of
sometimes.
course not.
Not tonight though, because it's Thursday and I'm teaching tomorrow. So maybe a little that one time." Well, listen, this topic was one, I got to admit, Jess, the one topic that when you brought it up, I was like, I really don't want to do this.
I couldn't
I don't
tell.
want to give any more airtime to this like South Carolina scandal than we absolutely have to. But I think we hopefully did a good job of connecting it to some of the principles that we're trying to teach our kids. And I think you were right to bring it forward, because there is this question of generational privilege. There is this question of free association. And how do you teach your kids how to do that? And I don't know that anybody taught us how to do it other than, well, it sounds like your dad probably did, Jess. But my dad's like, if they don't like you for who you are, screw them. It's their problem. So I'm like, well, okay. I didn't necessarily disassociate with others. They mostly disassociate with me. And on that note, any final thoughts here on our episode 3, season 4, episode 3? Final thoughts?
None. I think we covered
right.
it all as much as we can cover in this episode.
Well, we do want to give a shout out to it's Mandy, right? And
Mandy
her
Matney at
podcast.
Fitz News.
So
Yeah.
mention that one more time so we can tell people about it.
Yeah, Mandy Matney from Fitz News, the Murdoch Murders podcast. You think you can get it anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Highly recommend it. It's a very good podcast.
And the links are in the show notes. So
Yep.
Thank you, ladies. We'll see you guys next week. And we have the whole season planned out, and we're excited about March because it is Women's History Month.
Woo!
And we have, count them, 5 Thursdays in March. So a lot of opportunity to explore Women's History Month and women's impact on politics and family and mothering and all
the things.
suchness.
All
the things about moms coming up starting next week. Good to see you, ladies. I'll see y'all next Thursday.
Bye, y'all.